Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. We hope that you're all keeping well during this crazy time. We just wanted to say thank you for your continued support from all of us at Reuters Events. Today's webinar, we're going to look at how COVID-19 and the ongoing crisis is set to impact our industry and how it's going to impact customer service and experience. Obviously, in the past 8 weeks, we've seen the customer service landscape change more than in the previous 10 years, probably. In a short space of time, we've witnessed entire teams, departments, companies, and even industries move online whilst undergoing a complete reevaluation of what customers want and need. During today's webinar, we're going to look at whether customer centricity is still key, whether we need to look at more at focusing solely on efficiency and delivering results quickly. So with that, I'd like to just hand you over to today's moderator, Nicholas Zeisler, who will be leading today's session. Nick, if you'd like to introduce yourself and take things from here.
Paul, sure, thanks, and good day to all of our friends out in Europe, and good morning, everybody here in the States. My name's Nick Zeisler. I'm the principal of Zeisler Consulting, and I am very glad to be joined by a panel of experts in the CX field, as well as PR and other very important aspects that are being called upon these days with all of this stuff going on. Thanks also to Insight Group and Reuters Events for helping out and sponsoring this today. I would get real quick to introducing the folks on the panel, and then we'll jump right into the questions. And before we do that, I do want to remind everybody that you can ask questions in the chat box associated with this event. Please do, as we will be integrating those as we go on throughout the event today. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panelists. First up, we have got somebody with a lot of experience over a lot of different organizations, including Trader Media Group, Vodafone, View Entertainment, and Collinson. Currently, he is the Director of Global Omnichannel Retail for Sodexo from London. Trevor Gordon, good afternoon to you, Trevor.
Hi, Nick. Thanks, and welcome to everyone. Really looking forward to the discussion today. I think obviously very topical, and hopefully it'll be a really good session. Thank you.
You bet, Trevor. Thanks a lot. Also joining us from London, we've got a PR expert par excellence with experience from Diffusion PR, Pixel Health. Currently the head of Insight and PR for the Institute of Data and Marketing, Tim Bond. Hey, good afternoon, Tim.
Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here, and yeah, excited to have the chat as well.
Yeah. All right. Last and certainly not least, somebody who is wearing a lot of hats currently, including as co-leader of the Cambridge Salesforce User Group, also the chair of event planning for Inspire East, and something having to do with Happy Coffee, currently the head of customer service at Sure Pet Care, Sarah Metcalf. Hello, Sarah. Good day. Sarah?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are.
Oh, that's good. I thought I would get the bad tech problems out of the way.
Yeah, I thought maybe you were just doing one of those million things that you currently have on your plate right now. But
I wish I had that good of an excuse. But thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet, Sarah.
Thanks to the team.
Let's go ahead and start with you. I mean, with your incredible background and all of the things that you currently, all the pots you have your fingers in right now, you like to refer to yourself not only as the head of customer service at Sure Pet Care, but you're also the chief happiness officer, which is great. So I wonder, that obviously has to do a lot with the workplace and the team and so forth. How are you working on the happiness these days in the workplace with everything kind of up in the air as it is?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important, and it's great to talk about that, because happiness right now is a kind of a strange subject to be talking about whilst we're going through all of these kind of tumultuous and very difficult times. But happiness in the workplace is a massively important. So it's important to focus on kind of all the time, but especially at a time like this. And I'm very happy to say that we've always focused on the happiness of our employees right from day one. And so we have a lot of happiness built into kind of how our business works. But we've really kind of doubled down on that as well. during this time, it's even more important. And some people might want to know, why is happiness important? Maybe it's a bit too fluffy, maybe it's a little bit too out there, but actually, you know, all the studies that are coming out nowadays in terms of what leads to productivity, resilience, empathy, higher levels of customer service, ability to reduce time, all the things that really we're kind of needing to do, especially and more so in the COVID, and actually directly linking happier workplaces make more money. So focusing on that prior was really, really important. I think focusing on it now throughout this journey that we're all currently on, and then as we start to try to emerge, is even more important. So we've done things, and always have done, about making sure our employees are happy, and that's not kind of fluffy things. That's kind of making sure everyone is feeling good about themselves, and we kind of describe it as doing great work together with great people. And that's really where you want to focus on, kind of having good results, knowing what you do matters, being able to achieve things, and doing it together with a great relationship. And now that we're all kind of physically separated, it's more important than ever to focus on getting together in our relationships. And then kind of all the stuff that we want to have happen will fall out the other side, if you will. And Nick Marks, who worked on the Happy Planet Index, just released a study and said that the two things that were the most important right now are empathy and team meetings through this change. And he's got a great kind of scientific backing that says it's looking like that will give you a 5% return on investment. So if you can invest in that. So we're doing that. We have a 30-minute meeting every day with our team. And it's not always a operational meeting. Sometimes it's a bit of fun. Sometimes it's a bit silly. We played a game earlier this week. And we've also started a gratitude board in our whole company. So we've invited everyone to share 3 things they're grateful for every day. And that's been a really special initiative, I think I've found. We've done something really special, kind of allowing people to connect with each other, but in this kind of overloaded place where we're always on VC or we're always on video, it allows you to connect with your 50, 60, 100,000 colleagues without having to give quite the level of emotional investment. So you can still check on people, see how they're doing, share with them how you're doing and what's important to you. And it's been a really lovely window into everyone's kind of world right now. So that's one of my favorite things that we're doing. And we've also started creating a welcome video. So we've got some new starters who have onboarded with us in these really interesting times. And so to try and give them a sense and a flavor of who we are and what we do, we're all starting to record videos, which helps people who just started before we all went onto lockdown, as well as people who have joined and have never really met any of us in person. So that's a few of the things we're working on.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. For folks who aren't experiencing it right now, what must it be like to onboard at a new organization in all of this? Right? Yeah, that's great. You know, as you mentioned, of course, the passion that you have for happiness and how important that is, and your experience in emphasizing that. You probably are glad to see that so many organizations who might have looked at what you called, I'm sure, putting words in their mouth, the fluffy stuff, finally taking it more seriously, simply out of necessity. Like you have to think about these things now, whereas before it might have been, well, nice to have, but we'll get to that once we get this bottom line stuff figured out. And now they're finding it so important to have that as part of a kind of a portfolio inside their business. So Tim, want to ask your thoughts on that, about happiness in the workplace and how the teams are managing and so forth. How's that like over at DMA?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we within the organisation, we're very similar to some of the things that Sarah said there. We've got regular kind of small team calls, but then we've got an all company kind of Friday fun time as well, from about 4:30. So actually, next week is a pub quiz, which I'm actually organising, which for any of the team who are on the call is going to be really, really difficult. So you can look forward to that, because I have a reputation to uphold when it comes to setting quizzes. But But I think what's also interesting is what we're seeing within our industry. So we've got some research that we've been doing for the last couple of months around coronavirus and its impact on businesses. And one of the most interesting things that came out of that was actually that employees say that they have more confidence in their employer than they do in the UK government at the moment. And I think that really comes down to some of the things that Sarah touched on in terms of, it's been, businesses have been forced to actually show just how much they do care about kind of people's health and their well-being during this, unprecedented, it seems to be used in every other sentence at the moment. But, we saw in that survey that 91% of people said that they feel their company really has put their health and well-being first during the pandemic. And we're aware that that's also an industry within our space in data and marketing, where 90+% of people are able to work from home as well, which kind of makes that ability to continue kind of a lot better as well, that we have the technology in place.
Yeah, sure, Tim. So it's not just about making sure that all of the infrastructure is in place for folks that are working at home. It's also about the support mechanisms, right? And how important people's jobs are to them. Thanks. Trevor, going over to you at Sodexo, what are your thoughts on all this happiness stuff that Sarah loves so much?
No, I thought both excellent points raised by both Sarah and Tim, and for us, it's at the heart of what we do. COVID's had a massive impact on us. We have 450,000 employees on 30,000 sites. And in most of those sites, the majority of those employees are the face of our business. We're a customer service business, and they are the face to our customers who are our guests. And with that, we've had seismic changes in our businesses as other had. We've had completely some of our verticals and sites closing down. So for example, we've had to put a big effort into employee relief programs where we've had to furlough staff. They've transferred to new sites on a week's notice. And so whilst we always put a lot of effect in terms of training and comms, a lot of the internal comms has been increased, and the tone of that message more around the aspect that Tim and Sarah both touched on. And it's, that employee well-being during this time is just of massive importance. So very similar to the things that they've said, but for us, just absolutely key during this time. And I think we will as well probably see some of the tactical changes we've made over the last 6 weeks probably going forward in terms of how we manage that. So employee experience is absolutely of huge importance.
Yeah, sounds like it's pretty much universal across all three of these organizations that is something that you're emphasizing. And also, Trevor, as you say, that will endure beyond this. Let's pivot, Trevor, now and talk a little bit more externally about what's happening, what's changing when it comes to interacting with our customers. Trevor, are you seeing greater emphasis, similar to what we were talking about just now internally, when it comes to working with your customers on the personal side or the efficiency, knocking stuff outside?
Absolutely, and it has changed. We've had to make some tactical changes as a result of this. In pre-COVID days, which is a term probably people will be using very regularly now, we put a real effort in raising our game on both our customer engagement and experience. So with our customer engagement, it was very much on content and personalization. So some of the changes we've had to make to more the efficient side is we've had to pivot and focus on making tactical changes to our messaging. So this is very much supporting around the return to businesses and opening up from lockdown. So it's very much a focus is on key messages, hygiene, health and safety. But at the heart for our business, very much the fact that we're all about food. It's that focus that good food and eating are a really good part of life we want to re-embrace. So focusing very much on the pragmatic side of it, but reminding people that these are the things we love to share and that we want to do together, and experiencing them is super important. So that side on what I'd say in our messaging. In regards to our experience, I think Nick, you touched on it in the introduction. We've had massive pressure in regard to our digital channels, our fulfillment, our delivery, our supply chain, and new services. As an example, in the UK, we have moved people from our as an example, some of our colleagues have actually been redeployed from working at sites for Premiership soccer stadiums or in our sports and leisure venue at universities to actually running some of the mobile COVID testing sites in the country. So you can imagine the changes of working in a place like in a sports stadium to then moving and running that service on a whole brand new service that we've had to scale up in 2 weeks has been huge. And again, the pressure on some of our sites where we've had, we work with a lot of hospitals and kind of key industries. So a lot of the changes we've had to make in terms of our fulfillment, delivery, and supply chain has been massive. So yeah, both on the engagement and the experience side.
Yeah, it sounds like when it comes to that customer service versus efficiency, the personal and the efficient part, it's not as though it necessarily needs to be a zero-sum game. You can only choose one or the other to emphasize. But yeah, to your point, Trevor, with so much up in the air and so much changing right now, there's a lot of that. We just need to get things figured out right now, right? So it's more of that transactional stuff, perhaps, while also, of course, as you say, maintaining that personal touch and so forth, right? Yeah. Sarah, happiness with your customers, efficiency, and getting things done with your customers. What are your thoughts over there from Sure Pet Care?
I think what you said is perfect. It's not a kind of a game where you have to choose one or the other, right? I think if we're being transparent and really open with our employees, as we should be, then and share that we need to make efficiencies, we need to make things better. I strongly believe that the people on the front line are the ones who know how to create a huge saving and efficiency because they use your systems and talk to your customers every day. So ensuring you have that real clear line of communication from the front line back up will, I think, give you and deliver the efficiencies you might need. It could be a great opportunity to allow them to make those changes. Can you push the responsibility not onto those people, but give them the ability to make the changes that will impact your business. Get them to tell you the stupid things that drive them crazy because it takes them a long time or it wastes their time. We try to do like a 20-second rule. If something's making your life 20 seconds too hard, then we should get rid of it. That just give them the ability to make those things. So I think whilst we need to be doing both, and we should never be, I'm always wary of saying, happiness at work, is all about the business impact that it makes. And I think that's true. If you're giving your employees that autonomy to make the changes, then you'll get the efficiencies. Those will all come out of treating them well and creating that workplace environment.
Great. Yeah. And of course, that sounds to me, again, like one of those universal sort of things that you.
Yeah. Funny, right?
During the tough times, it's like they say, the character comes out during the difficult times. And here you're seeing that play out. Right. Tim, what are your thoughts on that? We talked about organizations and how folks are shifting around and so forth. And you provide information to others. Your customers are receiving your information as a product. What shifts are you seeing in how your members and their businesses are operating?
Yeah, so the research I kind of mentioned earlier that we just published on Tuesday is the second phase of our monthly tracker into the impact of coronavirus on businesses, specifically in the UK. Within our kind of community, it goes through the kind of key concerns, challenges, and what businesses need to kind of to be able to survive right now, which includes within our kind of community, that's brands, agencies, but also marketing, tech, service providers. So really kind of the whole spectrum of businesses. The big thing that we've really seen over both editions over the last couple of months is that businesses are operating at about half business as usual, and that's their own kind of self-judgment, which I think to your point is simply making it just really hard to continue and potentially to keep the doors open, or keep the doors with the ability to open them, as and when we're able to. In fact, a third of the people that we asked believe they won't be able to last longer than 6 months under the current conditions, with another 20%, so it takes it up to around half, not sure how long they might be able to survive, so they're just not sure. That means for us a huge number of businesses that we're speaking to are focused simply on trying to keep themselves afloat, and as I said, with that ability to open the doors as and when some relative normalcy returns. I think nearly 3/4 of businesses are also looking at the government schemes that we have here in the UK to support, We saw 74% either definitely or likely or have already used at least one of those, with the biggest one being, encouragingly, the job retention scheme. So that's 64% of businesses that have or definitely will be using that. That's followed by other things like the VAT payments, deferring VAT payments, and reclaiming some of the statutory sick pay that they're paying out as well. And so clearly a focus there on retaining existing staff, which is I think really important to some of the things we've already touched on. But I think essentially what our barometer really highlights is the continued impact the pandemic is having on revenue. So like I said there at the start, but there's also a worry that even once the restrictions are lifted, it could take months for these figures and the revenues to return back to normal as well. And so certainly from our standpoint, we've been calling on government to potentially try and extend some of the schemes that they've got, but also be very clear about the plan that the businesses, so the businesses can put their plans in place as well for some kind of phased return to work. Not only is there obviously the virus to consider, but also that ability to continue to be able to avoid having to make redundancies, which no employer wants to have to do. At the DMA, our hero principle and kind of the central theme of our entire code of practice actually is putting the customer first. So what I really think is been encouraging over the last couple of months now, verging on 2 months of lockdown here in the UK, is seeing how many businesses are not only putting their customers first, but are actually putting their employees first as well, and really just putting people first. I think has been really kind of heartening in a world where maybe it's not quite so easy to be as kind of warm-hearted. It's really kind of encouraging to see. So while I think our trackers don't necessarily paint an entirely rosy picture about the next couple of months and the challenges ahead, I think by putting people first and really committing to that, that's where we'll see brands continue to succeed and businesses able to survive, and potentially with even more loyal customers kind of out at the other end of this as well.
Yeah, you bet, Tim. It sounds like there's, again, kind of the theme through this talk today is about that balance between, this existential need to keep, so to speak, trains running, right? And keeping things happening in the first place and keeping the teams that you can employed and staying with you, while at the same time trying to also work not just with your own employees to make sure that they're feeling safe and that they're feeling valued and that they're not just completely frazzled by all of this, that it's a balance between those things. Sarah, I'm sure you'd agree. I mean, that you've kind of spoken to it so far. What are you seeing when it comes to outwardly? I mean, with your customers, are you finding that they're leaning more on, I just need my stuff, or do you think that they're also looking for that personal touch as well?
Yeah, we've had a really interesting, I guess, response in that because everyone's on lockdown, they tend to have a lot longer phone conversations with my team than they've ever had before. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So I don't want to do that. But actually, one of the things initially that we were working with for my team when this all came about was they were all feeling a little bit more tired because, whilst we can do something really efficiently, they wanted to talk to people about what was happening to them. And, calling up about their cat flap might be the reason or the only opportunity they had to interact with somebody perhaps that day. So that was an interesting thing that we found. We're very lucky. We've got amazing customers. They're absolutely just, I think, the best customers I've ever worked with. And they've all been really understanding. We've had times where we had to delay shipping things out because we do some special modifications, and there was a point where we didn't have anyone in the office, but everyone's been really, really supportive and really wonderful. So again, I think we haven't had customers requiring the efficiency quite so much. We would like to be more efficient, and we would like to use this to kind of make ourselves be able to serve faster, get people what they need. But I think, yeah, not to sound like a broken record, the personal side is winning. I think business, like everything, customer experience is all about people. Business is all about people, and ultimately we're in a place where that's the trump card. That's what's winning these days.
Yeah, you bet. Question comes in from participants in the webinar, and just as a reminder, go ahead and put your questions in the chat box there, and we will address those as best we can. This one is addressed to Tim, but I want to start with Trevor on this. I want to hear everybody's thoughts on these. But Trevor, this I think really goes to the kind of work that you're doing at Sodexo, and you kind of even alluded to it, but I'll just read it here as posed. It says, as there is more emphasis on cleanliness, in your opinion, how would hotels, and I recognize, Trevor, you're not exactly in hotels, but in the business you're in, I think it's similar. How would they protect or project this in a positive manner, the cleanliness? What action would you recommend to enhance that CS and the CX there?
No, it's a really good question, and I think kind of Tim and Sarah kind of referenced it earlier. It's that combination of getting across those key messages and that emphasis that there's processes, procedures, and health and safety guidelines in place, because it's all really about instilling confidence. We want our customers return. We want them to feel welcome, but at the same time, knowing that we're taking all of those steps to make sure that their return to enjoy our services are there. And I think it's whether any service industry, retail, hospitality, hotel, anything, it's just so important, because it's instilling and bringing back that confidence. Everyone's going to be using the term, I hate the term new normal, but it is trying to return to those types of behaviors and experiences we enjoy. It's all about having those extraordinary experiences, but you've got to get across that what they're going to be able to do is that their health and safety is top there. And to me, it's all around the messaging. It's all around the communications, the messaging, and it's not simplifying the messaging, but just ensuring that those key messages are at the forefront of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to this actually, Trevor, in just a second, but it sounds like what we're hitting on here, and we talked, I think, the other day, you and I, about Maslow's scale, and at this point, it's so many people are concerned about just their very safety and well-being, and as you're interacting with them, that's what's primary in their mind, and to shuttle that into either efficiency or customer support or customer experience isn't necessarily fair, because I think you're kind of doing both, aren't you? When you address that, you're giving people that little bit of a better feeling about how their health and safety will be taken care of.
Absolutely. Yeah. As Sarah and Tim said, it's about that personal touch. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. And Sarah, you had mentioned a bit ago about some of the and I think the term that you used was formulations, and wanting to make sure that those are done in a safe manner, right? You're shipping things out, right? And you're dealing with retail items and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when it comes, then that's going to have a question about cleanliness and health and safety, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just like we would for ourselves, or what we would, in the hotel example, I would take that personal kind of approach. If you were putting a project into plan, I think we have. I'm not sure that we've made them, but we one of our plans is to put a sticker to connect someone when we have a special modification. It's made by a person, so a sticker that just says this was made for you by one of our engineers, and has their name on it. So you could do that in the kind of hotel project, couldn't you? Sort of take a leaf out of the book about the kind of, we go to work for you, so you stay home for us. You could have a set of, these are the people in our hotel who are cleaning for you, and here's what's important to them. And again, you're connecting people with people, so you trust people to clean things. You sometimes, knowing the process is there doesn't always mean we trust in it, right? But if you connect it with a person or a story, then as humans we really connect with that. So that's where I would go with that one.
Right. You know, when you think about it, you stay in hotels and you get the name of the person perhaps who's servicing your room and that little card sometimes. This really brings that home more,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
you really do want to know that you've got somebody watching out for you. That's kind of
yeah.
the whole purpose of that service type of an engagement, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think like surprise as well. I remember went to stay in a hotel and I dropped something under the bed and there was a little card from the cleaner that said, "Oh, hey, don't worry, we clean under here too." And that was
That's wonderful.
fantastic, right? So just like, little personal touches that allow people to know, look, we've thought about you. We're taking this seriously. And you can shift that, right, to be appropriate in this time.
I,
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
I was just going to add, it's Trevor. I was just going to add that I think that surprise and delight piece that Sarah talked about is just such an opportunity here now, and it's that point of differentiation. And just to Sarah's point, that's going to be the type of service that you remember and go back to as a customer. No,
Yeah.
excellent point.
Yeah, awesome. Tim, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's agree with everything that's been said, obviously, but from our standpoint, we've done some research over the last few years around, and specifically around loyalty, actually. And what we keep finding come back is this idea of function first, which I think is really kind of, again, touches on what both Trevor and Sarah have said. And that is that, to foster any kind of loyalty or long-term relationship, you need to be able to, for anybody based in the UK, you'll know the brand Ronseal, and their slogan, which was, that it does what it says on the tin. And if you're not able to do that, then all of these other levers around, brand positioning and CSR and all these other things, they're all very well. But if you can't ultimately provide the service that you've promised, then they're all just fluff, to use a term we used earlier. So I think to the original question around how hoteliers might get around this, it's really about being very clear and simple in saying that you are doing it, and that you are that you're able to provide a service that reaffirms that, and that should be the primary focus. And after that, some of the things like surprise and delight, and showing up maybe some of your green credentials, if that's been a big focus, they are nice to have, but at this point in time, it's really about delivering the service that you promise.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks, Tim. I wonder, you're talking about that's how this is just communication. It's probably a lot of protocols that are already in place, and sometimes it's just making that clear and making that known, and that I think that'll bridge that gap a lot of times between the transactional, the efficiency, the did you get it done, and that personal touch that, oh, okay, not only did you get it done, but you're also acknowledging and recognizing that that's a concern of mine. And as a response to that concern that you're acknowledging, you're actually letting me know and putting it in that personal way with the note under the bed. Great. All right. Now let's talk about that, the safety and security and so forth. And I want to direct this question to Trevor. Your industry, you're focused on venues. We have this thing over here in the United States that we call baseball that I miss terribly. And as I understand it, y'all have got some sports over there in Europe as well, right? But your industry is focused on these venues where people gather, right? And it's not just sports and entertainment, but it's also working and on campus and so forth. So what do you think, given what we've discussed so far, are going to be the long-term impacts, especially as you interact with your customers going forward?
We've touched a lot on this and had a lot of discussion around this, and I think Tim raised it at the start of the call. We're looking very much at, as you say, Nick, we do 100,000 seat sports stadiums, we do universities, we do schools, hospitals, corporate sites, and in all of these, COVID's going to impact all of these. And as we return to work, there's obviously going to be that change in consumer behavior and the change in working practices. So we're very much, as you would guess, you would probably see acceleration in terms of and changes to the customer experience around the acceleration of digital channels, the contactless service, the contactless payment, all of those good things. And then and how do you affect the social distancing that as well? I was just on a call earlier today. We operate some very large sports stadiums in Spain, where obviously that overall fan experience is there, and there was talk about not only about the games restarting in the La Liga in terms of actually playing and actually having closed doors, but it's how do we actually deal with the fans that we expect to return to kind of, gather outside the stadium, even though they're not allowed to come in. And all I guess I would say is it's just an incredible amount of planning and logistics. But the one thing that we do in terms of all of our planning around this is put the customer at the heart of that decision making. So obviously we're looking at efficiencies around costs and how do you actually scale something over 30,000 sites. But every decision that we're making and looking at how we reopen and with the return to work is really much based around how does it impact that customer experience. That for us is super important. I think I'm probably getting to the point of repeating myself, but it's just the planning, the communication, and keeping that customer at the heart of the decision making.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of hitting on the same notes here when it comes to that. It's making sure that those things are done, but also communicating in a way that not only obviously gets that point across, but emphasizes the validity of the concern in the first place, and that's going to tie you out from that personal perspective. Let's go ahead and grab a question from the room here. Amber is asking about onshoring the workforce due to some outsourcers' inability to adapt to the work from home model. Just really quickly around the horn, I'd like to get everybody's thoughts on that. Let's go ahead and start with Tim. If you have thoughts on the onshoring or bringing the support work back in-house.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We're a UK-based association, so we're all on the island at the moment. Certainly, nobody happens to be abroad either. I think more broadly in the industry, we're definitely seeing, and that kind of tendency actually prior to this as well. But I think this is only going to kind of exacerbate it and potentially mean some kind of short-term shrinkage of the world. And some of that transition while people still aren't able to necessarily easily travel from country to country, to be frank. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see really, but certainly within our business it's not really had any major impact as yet.
Yeah, Trevor, real quick, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for us it's very much, we're an international business. Mm-hmm. and again it just comes back down to that planning and a lot of this is around looking at and looking at how the different countries are doing this. Unfortunately what we're seeing is not a lot of, let's say, alignment and a global perspective from this. But if we look at the different regulatory, legal, and all of the kind of policies and procedures you need to deal with, and then in terms of the on-sourcing side of it, it is just managing that, and it's probably bringing back aspects of our business. So for us, not a fundamental change, but it's just something that we're keeping at the forefront of mind of the return to work, particularly when it comes into the customer service and supply chain side. So it's just ensuring that all of the kind of safety checks and procedures are all in place.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Trevor. Now, Sarah, I want to ask you, pose the same question to you, but I also want to kind of talk about it in terms of success of the organization as well. You're talking a bit about hitting goals and metrics, and a lot of times that's the purpose of offshoring or outsourcing in the first place. In addition to talking about the question at hand with these services being brought in-house, perhaps potentially, how are you addressing overall your team's progress towards hitting the goals and making those bottom line, hitting those bottom line numbers?
Sure. Well, I think in terms of the onshoring or outsourcing, I think that is really, it's all about kind of being prepared and really kind of working in the 21st century, being here. We have set up outsourcers as some of our partners. We're a global organization as well. And we have customer service agents who work for us as well as outsourced partners. Everyone in their countries has been able to unplug and work from home. And always have been, I think, is the key bit. So for us, it wasn't a massive move. So I would recommend everyone kind of have a little think about that, right? This is the time to refresh, dust off our organizational processes and question ourselves if we think we can't work from home, maybe we should think again, because I think there's lots of organizations who had previously thought that, and actually they found that, hey, guess what, they can. And I think as well in CX and customer service, that opens us up to a whole different group of people. Home working, you know, if you're not going to be offshoring, if you're not going to outsource, you can take an advantage of a huge untapped market of people who maybe aren't able to work a traditional 9 to 5, but can work really well from home. So that's where I would go with that piece. I think in terms of goals and metrics, I'm going to be silly again. I don't really believe in those as drivers or things that we should be focusing on in a traditional call center environment. I think we've all been on a 10 out of 10 scored call that goes, "Hi, Nick." So you tick the box that you've used your first name. "How are you today?" So I've ticked the box that I've greeted you appropriately. You know, I've gone through all 10 of those things, and
Sure,
the end of the phone call, right? The most annoying phone call you've ever had where they haven't helped you at all. And the answer is there anything else I can help you with today? Tick.
Yep.
Right? And that's a 10 out of 10 phone call.
Yeah. For the internal score, sure.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I don't believe that scoring those metrics. I've had so many phone calls with companies where I know they closed at first call resolution, and I know that my problem wasn't solved. I've had to have 6 phone calls, and every one was closed first call resolution. So I don't think chasing those drivers actually delivers what we want, right? I think we need to think about moving from and I'm not saying don't measure them, because you want to know what's happening in your organization, but those should not be the metrics that are driving behavior, right? That's the problem, is that you want to measure things that drive the appropriate behavior to get the outcome you want. And I'm not saying everyone needs to, have a happiness guarantee like we do. You can still have, do what works for your business, but measuring those traditional metrics quite often makes those metrics go down. It's like only focusing on getting more profit. Quite often you're not as profitable as you would have been if profit were the outcome, right? So I think all those metrics are great outcomes of focusing on the right thing. So creating intent, training your staff, allowing them to fix things, not getting in the way, not putting the bureaucracy and the red tape. And that goes across the board and can work, in highly regulated organizations as well. Doing the right thing, making sure your team know what that is, right? Being super clear. We've talked a lot about clarity. And then that feeds into, kind of your outsourcing, onshoring conversation, right? If everyone's really clear what you're trying to achieve, and if they've got the tools to achieve those things, one, they're going to be happy at work because they're going to make progress and do great things. And two, what you'll probably find is you've got better metrics. You'll have better NPS or CSAT or whatever it is you want to measure. And again, you should measure those things so you know what the picture is. But I'd much rather I didn't have a 10 out of 10 call that sounded like the one we just had, but that I knew that I had provided the service that customer required.
Yeah, surely. So it sounds like been drinking from the Zappos.
Oh,
right?
so long ago. Yeah, absolutely. And we talked earlier about the phone calls. My team don't have SLAs, never have done on kind of call time. It's about doing the right thing, for the customer. Yeah. And the people on the phone with that customer know how to do that. That's why I really hope that one of the things that this change for us does for CX and for customer service is elevates these people as highly empathic, really valuable members of your company. They shouldn't be just a cost of sale. They are the people who interact with your customers. So I hope that that's where we were going anyway, but I hope that this kind of gives that a little boost, and that customer service becomes a much higher valued position across the board.
Sure. Yeah, we all hope for that. Right. Absolutely. Tim, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think internally within the DMA, I think the key for us has just been being a bit more flexible. We've been quite lucky in that the leadership here has been just that, and that we're able to work from home. But whether that's things like just childcare. I myself have a 5-year-old who regularly interrupts my morning team call to say hello to my team, but also then enabling people just to get outside during the day. It's so easy, even when we're in the office, it was so easy just to sit there and kind of plow through as everybody can and kind of eat your lunch at your desk. We actually, to give them credit, our CEO sent a note very early on to say, guys, take an extra half an hour with your lunch or variously in the day. Take yourself outside and get some fresh air. Go for a walk. We're able to still do that within the restrictions in the UK, and we should be taking advantage of that. Especially while the weather's good, which in itself is rare in the UK. So, I think more broadly, we're seeing a similar amount of kind of flexibility around the industry and around businesses. And people trying to be flexible. Even those who have had to furlough staff, for example, those staff are still being encouraged to, utilise access to maybe training and personal development, or encouraged to volunteer their time if they can as well, through and actually try and do some good. We actually within the DMA have created a fund along with our kind of sister charity, the DM Trust, and we've committed nearly £500,000 of funds towards training for people who've been furloughed or made redundant as a result of COVID-19. That was announced a little over a week ago. So you can find out more about that on the DMA and IDM website. But that's just a little part of what we're trying to do to help people, find personal development in these challenging times, and maybe if they're having challenges with work at the moment, putting themselves in the best place post COVID-19, when we return to some relative normalcy.
Sure, a lot of that just kind of lends itself to the discussion of just being flexible and being able to understand and react to the dynamic nature where we find ourselves. Trevor, what say you on this?
No, I think
new way of looking at your numbers or whatnot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're very much were and still are a commercially led organization, but the quality of both our employee and customer experience, whilst always important, is come to the forefront. And we know that in terms of retaining both our employee well-being, but also in terms of our customers, I think to Tim's point around loyalty and brand advocacy, I think people now will rethink, there's going to be permanent change in consumer behavior. And I think we will see that, our customers will remember who stood out and who treated their employees well and who actually appeared to do the right thing. And I think in terms of, for us, it's gone very much where, let's say we had a real strong focus on the quant side. To Sarah's point, it's very much focusing on that qualitative. So it is with our customers, a lot more where we have very data-driven insight and goals and metrics, which we still do. It's balancing out with the kind of ears on the ground with our customers, but as well, then it's the kind of the two-way communication with our employees in terms of their ability to, to Tim's point, ensure their well-being's there, that they're taking the time out, that they feel the support's in place, and at the same time, they're feeling in the right way to interact, our own employees to interact and engage with our customers and provide that duty of care to them. So now hugely important. And I think it will probably, we talked about permanent changes in behavior and ways in our business. I think that's something that will be a positive legacy from all of this.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. That's great insight and a good way actually kind of bring it all back together as well from this conversation about dynamism and so forth. But want to hit some of these questions that we're seeing out here. Sam is asking about the different self-service solutions and how folks are moving more to that. Or how are you seeing the balance between channels and between ways of supporting your customers, just from that, I guess, from the transactional perspective, and what are you seeing, if you are at this point yet seeing shifts and changes in that? Sarah, let's start with you.
So we've had we've had a bit of a reduction actually in contact. So for whatever reason, maybe people are feeling less pressured to phone or fixing things themselves because they have the time. I'm not sure.
You mean,
So
fun?
that's actually been supportive for my team, you know,
Huh.
working in this way in a kind of stressful area. Yeah, we've actually had a nice reduction in contact, which has been interesting. But the channels have not changed really. We haven't had a massive change. I think that they're just similar levels, just everything has kind of just reduced ever so slightly. Um, and again, that could just be, you know, instead of people emailing whilst they're at work and then going home and getting information they needed to pass back to us when they're troubleshooting, they're at home now, so they can go ahead and get all the answers. Um, it could just be people have other things that they want to be spending their time on. We're not really sure, but
Yeah.
it's been because we've been super flexible, and some of our team, myself included, have children, and so you have the added burden of doing school. You know, we've really had to work on the hours and when people are available. So it's actually it's been a really nice way that we can be super supportive of people, you know, swapping hours so that they can do homeschool or whatever they need to in the contact center, and their colleagues can support them without anyone feeling kind of overburdened. So
Sure.
we're very grateful. Like I said, we have the best customers.
That's it. That certainly helps. Good.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, how about you? What are your thoughts on the either the volume or the balance between the channels and whatnot?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Obviously, all of our lives are getting more digital anyway, but this only seems to have exacerbated that. I think what's been really interesting has been the number of brands that have managed to kind of switch to a direct-to-consumer model incredibly quickly. So you know, there's even things like Heinz, which you'd never necessarily think of being kind of direct-to-consumer, are now doing kind of big bundles of things that you can order direct. So I think that could be an interesting, because that's been a trend that's been growing over the last few years, and seeing that have a lasting impact. I've been wondering just in the last day or so whether that could see a lasting impact for retailers who are already kind of, you know, going through all the challenges of trying to keep having to pay rent in the current climate as well, you know, and retain staff as well as sales. But then so I think it's going to be really hard to see what the long-term impacts are going to be now. I think we're only going to see those in the next couple of months once things start to get back to normal. What changes are going to kind of stick and which ones aren't. I think working from home, I think it was Sarah that mentioned it earlier. I think that idea that there are a whole host of businesses who just kind of said, oh no, there's no way we could ever work from home. I think there are a lot of businesses now that are realizing that that's just poppycock, and that actually it's very easy to work from home, and in some cases can be far more productive. Whether it's short, you know, whether it's permanent or just enabling people to do it once or twice a week, it can be not only good for them, but actually good in terms of productivity of the work they're able to put out as well.
Yeah, it's the old saying about necessity being the mother of invention, and then I guess what we're learning now is that it's also the thing that turns we cannot do that into, well, we have no choice but to do that, whatever that may be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, Trevor, what are your thoughts on this as far as, you know, call volume and channels? But then also, I want to kind of shift this into the exit question as well, having to do with what's going on now, the changes that we're seeing, and what we think will endure long term. But first, go ahead and hit on your thoughts of the channel volume and so forth.
No, I think what Tim's saying absolutely right. I think people are seeing fundamental changes to their business model and consumer behavior impact the purchase. If we look at the role of, I think in Amazon, the latest stat I saw was about 50% of retail purchases started through Amazon. I think the role of marketplaces, direct to consumer, all of this is just changing. For example, we've seen Uber launch Uber Eats business in the UK in the last 2 weeks. So we're seeing kind of, you know, where companies would be doing a year's insight or research into actually maybe approaching into a new extension of the business model. They're now doing it in a matter of weeks. And I think to Tim's point, the long-term impacts of this and who kind of what's left will be there. I think, you know, there's a lot of insight in this in the moment. I do think, though, kind of what I stated earlier, is that we will see these changes in consumer behavior, but we will see, you know, less the brand advocacy, but I do think things like customer loyalty and brand advocacy will come back into play, which will be super interesting. So you know, you can take it two ways. You can be extremely concerning time, but at the same time, it's a real exciting time, because I think for companies like ours who, you know, that employee and customer experience is there, we also see that there is an opportunity, new opportunities expanding, and that you can come to as well. So I think we will see some fundamental shifts, and all the channels that were mentioned will accelerate. Bricks and mortar will still be there because people want that personal touch. So it'll be interesting, you know, if we ask ourselves this question in 6 months, it'll be interesting to see how these predictions have come off.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's a whole new way of doing things, but really it's just an emphasis on the things that were important all along, kind of. Maybe it's a bit of a getting back to basics even.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree. I think it does bring it back to that. It's the point around, you know, you can take the quantitative view of insight and data driven, but it is that basics around customer experience, customer engagement. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sarah, the future of happiness. What do you think is the biggest thing that's changing, but then it'll also endure long term?
I think I hope that the future of business is happy. I think I really do. I
As long
believe
as you're
that.
doing your part, Sarah, I'm sure we're all.
I will never stop. I will never stop. Um, I think it's really important, and you know, we've talked a bit about the fluffy side, but the science and the metrics are all behind that, right? When you look at things like customer purchase after kind of emotion, you know, revenue is directly linked to improved customer experience and to positive emotions, right? So emotional connections. You know, you have that investment calculation by Nick Marks, which is unreal, about, you know, treating your employees with empathy and support, and what that could give us. So there's some great longevity studies around comparing kind of standard stock market prices with the great places to work, and how they track each other. And actually, what you know, they both had a dip in 2008 in the recession, but happier companies returned and started growing much faster. So again, if you're taking that piece about happiness, and again, it's really easy to focus on the wrong things. So when I talk about happiness, it is that results and relationships piece. It's not about free smoothies, fruit bowls.
Right.
You know, it's not about those things at all. It's about you know, you have to put more time and effort in, and that's why we kind of have focused historically more on that employee engagement side. That's a whole nother webinar. But but if you take that view and kind of look through that lens of either increasing, you know, your relationships or your results, that's kind of what we've been talking about. And actually what I'm hearing from everybody is that, you know, back to basics or whatever you want to call it, it is about the people.
Yeah.
And I think those businesses who have done that, or those businesses maybe who just needed a wake up call, and this is giving them a chance to go, oh, hang on a second, this
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah.
They're going to do better out of this, and I
Sure.
hope that carries them forward.
Yeah. It's a new emphasis. Tim, Bond, to you, exit question about what's going to stay and what's going to go.
Yeah, I think really to echo a lot of what Sarah said about the humanity, I think, and I hope that this is that this will make us all a little bit more human in how we kind of treat each other. By which I mean that we're all a little bit more honest with each other about and in how that we actually present ourselves, whether that's in our personal lives, our physical lives, our digital lives, or our work lives. I think there's a host of trends at play here, from things like social media performance and you know, that kind of always giving the rose-tinted picture through those kind of channels, right the way through to what I already mentioned, that idea of over working from home and feeling like when you're working from home, you need to be, on at 8 o'clock or 8:30 and working right the way through till 8 the next time, just so that everybody sees that you're working extra hard. But I've seen so much more understanding about things like people needing to deal with kids like I have myself, and while on work calls, and employees being encouraged to take time away from their workstations, their makeshift workstations at home. I don't believe necessarily the hype, as I think Trevor mentioned as well, that this term, the new normal, I'm not a massive fan of. But I do hope this can trigger some small changes in how we all interact, which could end up having some really big impacts long term, from how we work day to day, right the way through to actually how customers engage with brands as well.
Yeah, the irony being that this time that's pushed us all further away will kind of bring us together as far as that transparency and that humanity. I agree, Tim. Great,
Exactly.
good points, and good points all. In fact, thanks to Tim Bond, head of Insight and PR for Data and Marketing Association, Sarah Metcalf, head of customer service for Sure Pet Care, and Trevor Gordon, the director of global omnichannel retail at Sodexo. Thanks especially to everybody who joined us here. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for your patience. I know we went a couple minutes long. Thanks to Paul and Johnny and the group from Insight Group and Reuters Events. This has been a very enlightening and happy conversation. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to the folks who attended. There is more to come. Please keep tuned to the Reuters Events and Insight Group website for upcoming webinars all the way through the pandemic, as well as I promise someday we'll get a chance to get together in person again. Thanks to all. Have a great day, and we will talk to you again soon.